Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. You have, met with us many a times, and today is one of those special moments that we are excited to bring marketing in cannabis. It's a conversation, it's a topic that we often have and that we see being engaged across platforms. And we thought, why not bring this conversation directly to you? So I'm Gia Morón, president of Women Grow, and today I am joined with three amazing women in the industry. And we're going to jump right into conversation. So I'm going to introduce them. I'm going to ask what brought them to this industry in terms of their backgrounds. And then we're going to jump into many of the questions that we've gotten, not just in the recent week that we were promoting this conversation, but over time, as well as just questions that we have as a company about marketing cannabis. And so we have Valda Coryat, which she said she doesn't have a yacht, but I believe in the future. She's the Chief Marketing Officer of Trulieve. We have Yesenia Garcia, who is VP of Marketing at Curaleaf Southeast. And then we have Lisa Buffo, founder and CFO of Cannabis Marketing Association. Thank you so much for joining us, ladies. How are you today?
Doing great. Good to see you.
Great.
Thanks for having us, Gia.
Listen, I am so happy that you all are able to join us because I can only imagine how busy you are, not only at this time, but have been over the last year or so. Hey, Beth, I see you sending us a message there. But before we go into those deep dive questions, I'd love for you to, hey, Khadijah. All right, I'm going to stop doing that. I can't help it. When you see those friends in the industry, like, hey. But I want to first introduce this conversation by really asking you all to share your background. And the reason why that's important for our viewers, I believe, is it helps them to understand if they're considering this industry, where they fit, how they can apply their skill sets, and even just understanding the journey that it took for you to get here. So I'll start with you, Valda, because we're looking at Hollywood squares here. So I'll start with you. Can you just give us some background about what you were doing before you entered the cannabis industry?
Sure. So I started in marketing. I'll say I've been in marketing for 24 years. Yes, you heard that right. Okay. I actually have a 23-year-old daughter. So she's my oldest and my baby is 14. But anyhow, so I started in traditional marketing, consumer packaged goods out of New York, worked for Colgate-Palmolive. I then moved into the beauty industry. And then before leaving New York, I actually worked for Heineken. They're Caribbean and Americas Exports Group. So I have really marketed in a number of different categories. When I moved to Florida, though, I made the decision that I wanted to not necessarily work for multi-billion-dollar companies, but to be part of small to medium-sized businesses and to be a part of that growth, right? So I love high growth markets. And just before joining Trulieve, which is really interesting, I actually marketed mangoes. And I'll mention a little bit more about that. Yes, my favorite fruit. I ate it from the moment I knew that I could taste. I love to tell people that story. And of course, there's myrcene in mangoes, and we know myrcene is one of the terpenes found in cannabis. So the story comes together because by the time I was approached by a recruiter about working for Trulieve and they mentioned cannabis, I said, I have no reservations whatsoever. I think my experiences could be really interesting towards a brand in the industry. And a year and a half later, here I am.
So I want to get back to the executive recruiter piece, but also touch on that. Wow, you're 25 with a 24-year-old and a 14-year-old. How did you manage to do that? I mean, wow.
Thank you for that
I would have
compliment.
never thought you had a 24-year-old.
I am so far from 25. I just good genes.
Absolutely. Listen,
Absolutely.
anyone that's watching, I want you to know I had to interrupt before we came live. And you guys know, if you watch me, you know that I am always honest. Last time I was on the air, I had a hot flash. So this time I had to bring my fan on. Okay. So yes, Gia has a fan just in case. Yesenia, I would love for you to share your journey into the industry. Could you just give us some background about what you were doing before cannabis?
Sure. So I started my career in marketing by establishing an in-house agency for a Native American tribe and the gaming establishment that they ran. So that was definitely a very interesting experience. I ran it for 10 years. So anything from, sports sponsorships, I got to deal with, the Heat and the Dolphins and everyone else in between. Very exciting. And on the gaming side, and then on the Native American side. So I got some sort of exposure to dealing with, minority communities and things like that. And I really came into this space looking for an opportunity in an emerging market, and a market that I felt was doing good for the general public, right? So I wanted to be part of something bigger, and I'm happy to say that I've found that in Curaleaf. Being a part of this wellness journey for our patients is definitely challenging and exciting all at once.
I love your background because we're seeing a lot of Native American tribes now entering the industry, and there's a lot of talk around that. So I think that that's incredible that you had that experience prior to, and there's been so much talk about the gaming industry, right? And its rise and how it's entering in so many markets. So the fact that you have that previous experience, bringing that into this industry, and now beginning to see legalization as well as gaming entering so many markets, that's an incredible background experience that you have. Congratulations. I want to hop over to Lisa, Miss Lisa here. I would love for you, Lisa, to talk about what you were doing before cannabis and even how you were able to launch the Cannabis Marketing Association.
Yes, thank you. So I actually started my career in nonprofits, but marketing has been the thread through all the different roles I've had. I actually worked in a military facility working with service dogs and wounded warriors who were coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan at the time, and actually got into social media marketing, spreading the word about service dogs and what they could do. And that kind of caught where I caught the marketing bug. And then I worked for a few early stage startup venture capital firms helping incubate tech companies. And I worked in the tech industry for a while in operations and in marketing, and was considering starting my own business at the time when cannabis had just legalized in Colorado in about 2013 at the time. And I actually kind of had a come to terms moment where I dropped everything and packed up and just drove out to Colorado wanting to join the industry year one of adult use. And I started trimming. I actually trimmed for a while. And then I ended up joining a cannabis tech startup as their chief marketing officer. And it was in that role that I tried to use my tech playbook and realized none of it applied. And again, this was about 7 years ago, but it was very hard to translate that into cannabis marketing. So CMA actually started very grassroots, where I just started hosting meetings after work, asking other professionals who had been marketing in this space longer how they did it, and how at the time the conversation was how to not get shut down and not get in trouble. And it caught pretty quickly as far as recognizing that all of us marketers, regardless of what, whether it was C-suite or entry level, we're running into these issues, and organically grew from there. And we've been, running ever since.
Thank you so much. And I'm so glad you said that, because I think we're going to talk about that today, right? And because there are so many regulations in place, and they differ from state to state. And so I'm so glad to hear what led to CMA, because that's what's important here. Like, we want to help connect with some of the smaller businesses and perhaps offer some tips and advice, right, as they're building up their brands, to understand. I mean, on the Women Grow platform, we hear time and time again, a business was shut down because of this and that. And maybe, just maybe today, your words, your experience, your background will help someone's business, prevent them from getting shut down, and better yet, help them grow, right, and expand their brand to perhaps the next level. So I'd like to start us off. I have a bunch of questions here, some, as I said, that I gathered from folks that have emailed us over time. But one of the questions that I have here is there a difference between traditional marketing and cannabis marketing? And if so, what have you found since entering the industry thus far? You know what? I was like, I'll just jump right in. Whoever wants to start us off.
Yeah, I don't know who wants to. I mean, I'll jump in. So I guess when you say traditional marketing, for me, what shapes marketing in cannabis is the industry, right? And so everything that you think about the category, from being high growth with, I say, an unexpected mix of customers or consumers. Here in Florida, I mean, we're seeing exponential growth in terms of people joining the registry, shifting regulatory environment. But what's really special to me is that passionate group that's at the heart, right? I think across any state that you would see, cannabis in, there's an activist group. There are those people at the grassroots who, and I put it almost like, when I think of brand terms, it's kind of Nike stepping forward and embracing Colin Kaepernick, right? It's like, it's that moment where you realize, wow, so there's been this group that really created this industry, to be honest. I mean, we're all working in it right now, but the people who lobbied, who, voted, who were able to get the, make it legal, are the ones that I think are actually the heart of the industry. And I hope we don't lose that. So when you're marketing cannabis, it's not just about product benefits, right? It's not just about the functional delivery. Yes, in a medicinal market, we have that, but there's this other thread that kind of runs through. And one of the things for me being on this panel, I hope we don't lose that.
Good, thank you. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of add there. So, marketing in general it stays through across all platforms, all types of businesses, right? I think what differentiates this space is when the brand voice steps up, right? And says, this is how we are going to connect with the communities, with our patients, with adult use, across, and how we are standing up. And I think that branding piece is what really will drive each and every one of us in our efforts.
Good.
And just to add to that, I think cannabis has more than one and has almost endless unique selling propositions. When I think marketing or big marketing, sometimes I think of those toilet paper commercials where they show this product is slightly more absorbent than the other, and that's the value prop, and that's what they're selling it on. But I know exactly what I use that product for. Cannabis has so many different uses and for so many different types of people, that translating that and being able to communicate that amidst 80 years of misinformation is both the challenge and exciting opportunity that communications professionals in this space have. But I absolutely want to echo what Valda said as well.
So, but that's actually interesting. So let's talk about this, because one of the questions that I had, right, given that cannabis regulations are different from state to state, are there guidelines that you all are following in terms of promoting these products for consumers?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I don't want to be the first this time. Somebody else.
All right, so I'm gonna put it on Lisa this time, and the reason being is that, Lisa, because you said you started out in Colorado in early 2013, so clearly we've seen a transition happen even from that time. So why don't you take a stab at this first?
Yeah, so I'll start with a small marketing history lesson. So the cannabis market marketing regulations are nearly exactly pulled from the Distilled Spirits Council of the U.S. Code of Responsible Alcohol Marketing Practices. It varies slightly state by state, but generally speaking, the framework, Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol, including advertising, was pulled from the alcohol industry's playbook. So the way the regulations have been implemented is following that. And obviously cannabis is not alcohol, so we can get into that a little bit later. But as far as the common thread, it is that set of standards and that set of regulations. So I think when it comes to marketing compliance, understanding what is the laws and the regulations in your state is important, but also understanding the genesis of where it come from helps give it a little bit of context. There are marketing and branding kind of general best practices out there. And I do think every brand has a different way of telling their story. But as far as the basis and the minimum, it's understanding those regulations and making sure you're not making health claims, which I know can be a bit of a difficult line when we all have these exciting stories to tell about how cannabis has helped us and how we communicate that message. So I'll start with that as far as a basis for that question.
Yeah, let's come back to that. Yesenia, why don't you jump in here?
Yeah, the health claims is definitely one that, I'd like to echo. So we are always very, very cautious not to, we all know the stories behind everything we do every day, right? And that's what I think helps to keep us in this industry and motivate us for everything that we do. But taking it to the marketing side of it, it really goes beyond making these medical claims. And again, just having that brand voice and helping people feel like they can, feel safe in the space, right? And how do we connect with people on that level? And when you're talking about adult use markets versus medical markets, we tweak and follow the regulations, that need to be followed. But at the end of the day, it's marketing 101. It's making the connection. That's all it's about.
So
I'm glad you said that. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Valda.
That's okay. I'm going to go back to the first question because I think it's almost like when you ask, what is traditional marketing versus cannabis? You're hearing a little sprinkle of alcohol, a little sprinkle of pharma, maybe a little bit of, cause marketing as well. So really in cannabis, the person who can flex, right, and against all of those different sort of variables that you have to consider in your decision making every day for your brands is really the ones that are going to benefit the most. So it's a really fascinating industry. I think for anyone who's watching this and wondering, would I even consider joining it or what have you? As you can hear, all three of us have very different backgrounds, right? And we bring all of those unique experiences to an industry, and there's space for all of us. I think that's the part for me. When I worked in other industries, you found basically people who were veteran beauty industry people, right? They kind of hop from different beauty companies to another. Part of it is cannabis is a new industry, so it doesn't have as many years, but I love the diversity of the people on my team, right? I love the diversity of the people who are my peers when we sit around the table and we talk. We come from very different backgrounds, and yet there's room and space for all of us.
Because you're coming also with diverse perspectives as well. And given that these products are serving everyone, I think it is important that we are coming with these diverse perspectives. And there's a question that I gotten in a chat that I will bring up when we come around to speaking about diversity and inclusion, because that's something that I think is very important. So one of the questions and some of the confusion that some of the small businesses have come to us about in terms of what's the difference between marketing and branding, and because again, you guys have the expertise when you're talking, or some of these small businesses, they're trying to figure it out. They may not have the manpower or the budgets to like tap someone to do some of their marketing, so they're trying to start out small, and they're like, well, what's branding and what's marketing? Is it the same thing? And I'm confused. This word keeps coming around. Does anyone want to define that for our audience?
Yep. So I've mentioned brand a few times. So
yes.
For branding is really who you are, right? So the core of who the company is and the value system and how that's going to be represented. And then marketing is how you're going to execute and how you're going to, represent your brand and the tools you're going to use in the market to spread your messages, your awareness, etc. So, I mean, that's very basic, but that's how I would differentiate both.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I think, and Yesenia is exactly right? But a lot of times the way you create a brand is also through an experience. So, but it starts first with, so marketing is really all the stuff, right? You decide what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, the tools, the tactics, SEO, social media, events, etc. But people will remember your brand based on the consistency of what you present. Right. So there's images, right? If you think of McDonald's, you see the golden arches, right? I love Target. Target is one of my favorite retailers, examples. But you see that bullseye and you're going to get design, you're going to get good quality at a mass price, etc. But they weren't always known that way. Right? So they made a choice at some point in the company's history to represent something, and design was very much a part of that. The one I love to, use as an example, I'll talk about Alvaro Luque. He is the CEO of Avocados from Mexico. So I mentioned marketing mangoes, right? Mango is a commodity. It's a fruit. Avocados is a fruit. It's a commodity. So, but for somehow he was able to build Avocados from Mexico, right? It's a brand. He's done a brilliant job of that. He and I served on or presented at a conference together once. And I remember complimenting him because for me, that's when you start to really understand brand. It's like there are sounds, symbols, experiences that surround it. But if anything, it's the consistency of how you deliver it.
I love that. That's a great analogy. Really, really great. So if we, from that point, when we look at social media marketing, right, and what's happening there, and there's so much, by the way, anyone that's tuning in, trust me, I do plan on us bringing, and Tanya, don't forget to let me know, we got to talk about social media separately. That requires a whole other conversation, because in this industry, that is probably the only space we do get to market, but then there are so many barriers there. But when we're thinking about social media and marketing, Lisa, there's so many barriers there. Can we talk a little bit about that? Because I think so many people get that confused as well.
Yeah, so part of the issue with social media marketing is that the platforms are very intolerant to cannabis in this space. And generally, I mean, these are massive tech companies effectively. So they're using sophisticated algorithms that are just sensing the presence of cannabis, a Schedule I controlled substance in their eyes. And therefore, there is no delineation as far as what would be coming from the illicit market and what is a legal, regulated, honest, and operating business. So as far as the issues that come up, I mean, the biggest one, I get emails all the time from people who have frantically had their Instagram accounts shut down and are trying to figure out how to connect with the human being at the company to explain to them everything they are doing is compliant and within the law and their terms of conditions. But they're at the part where they just got flagged by that algorithm and they've had their account wiped out. So social media marketing presents an issue from the channel perspective. And yeah, particularly on Instagram and Facebook. But one of the ways I think brands can start in marketing in general, and particularly for small businesses, is using these platforms to tell their story. So you always want to stay away from selling and promoting cannabis. No prices, nothing that's going to imply you are trafficking a controlled substance. But it's okay to tell your story. It's okay to talk about who you are, what you do, and use that as a form to connect with your followers and your customers. Still doesn't mean if you're showing images that you're perfectly safe, or it may or may not get flagged, but there are ways in which to leverage those platforms that reduce your risk as a whole.
Does that fall under the category then of education? So as you're telling your story, you're educating all consumers, so to speak, right, about who you are and what you do. Would that be correct?
Yes, I mean, I think education is the key to all of this, and the key to destigmatizing is when there's truth and there's storytelling and there's fact there. That's how we break down those barriers. So yes, I mean, absolutely, I would echo that.
So I want to then ask the Trulieve and Curaleaf is, are you guys impacted by this? Because I would imagine that, you know, you are introducing your products and educating the market, but have you been impacted by this in terms of social media marketing?
Yeah, we since I've gotten here, our followers have grown exponentially. We have not had our page shut down. I probably should knock on wood saying that. But you know, it's largely, I would say, and I'm going to give credit. Hopefully, some of the team is watching, although they should be monitoring social media for me and responding to customers. But anyhow, no, but it's because of the people that were here before me. I learned a ton from our digital media team. They know the ins and outs. They know the images, the copy that you know, will or will not get us flagged. You know, it's through experience. I think most of the team has been here for about 3 years. So I have deep knowledge within the company on the do's and don'ts. So I really lean on them for that. So we have not had an issue in terms of growing our audience and engagement and all of that. But I will also say this is where knowing your marketing the tools in your toolbox, right? So the marketing mix, we are not solely dependent on social media, right? Our website is a huge, you know, base of what we do, right? Yep. For on many levels, it's what we own, and that one in particular with SEO strength is how we're able to then drive people to us. And so those who are interested, they have a, you know, a little box that they say, yes, I'm 21 or older. So there's a gate there for them to enter. And we have also, you know, a backup to say that we're not appealing to minors, let's say. And then besides that, we also, you know, email and texting. I mean, there's other things also, by the way, which you need to make sure that you've got a double opt-in, right? So the laws around everything are extremely important. But we're not dependent on social media. We're not dependent on any one tool. And in fact, even texting is about to change as of May 31st. So you know, it's really, really important.
What does that mean for anyone I always have to be our viewers, right? So someone's probably saying, what does that mean, texting? Yeah. So I'm going to ask on their behalf, what does that mean?
So there's something that's commonly known as 10DLC. So that you can look up, you can Google that and get more information. But in terms of the carriers that are out there, right, and the ability for your text, whether it's SMS or MMS, the rules are a little bit different. You know, there are now going to be limitations. Some are no longer going to allow that direct pass-through, right? Even if the customer said that they were interested. You know, others are just going to stop altogether. So, I mean, there's more technical, you know, explanation behind it. So I don't want to spend the whole, but the 10 DLC, if someone looks that up, it actually does have, it revolves around a regulation. And we know that texting as we know it as of May 31st is going to change.
Interesting. Lisa, it's crazy how I'm getting inbox messages on my phone. You know, we're live. So someone wants to know, where can they find these guidelines that you mentioned in terms of, you know, in terms of staying within marketing guidelines per state?
So we have some information in our member portal at Cannabis Marketing Association, but every state's government website will have it all written out in their language. And it will also have a bulletin and generally a space where you can sign up for their newsletter for notifications for when they change and update things too. So if you're in a certain state or specific areas, I definitely recommend making sure you have that site bookmarked and tabbed, and being on that newsletter so you can be aware of what's going on. And they will also do, you know, how our government works. They will do regular hearings where when they're considering rule changes, they will hear from the community and get opinion. So it's good to also know when your local government is considering those things, whether it's marketing or related to the industry as a broader whole.
Okay, thank you so much. Because I know I'm like, it's literally happening, just watch. But I'm glad you answered that. And the reason why I think that's important that you did answer is that there's a lot of businesses that are only just starting now, right? They were not necessarily interested in entering the cannabis industry, but now that their states are fully legal, people are becoming more open to it. But what we're finding is that there's a lot of information out there and people don't know where to go. And so they're starting businesses, but they're, getting fines. They're, being shut down and not understanding that there are actual guidelines out there that you can work with. Doesn't mean that it doesn't change, but at least they got a starting point. But I actually want to change the direction that we're going here. So as women marketers in the industry, what are your thoughts on grow culture in marketing? Do you find that it's similar or different than industries like, alcohol, tobacco, what have you? And, what sort of, what steps are the big companies in this industry taking to eliminate, bro culture and the stigma? I want to jump over to you, Yesenia, to see if you've got any insight on that here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, it exists, right? I'm thankful again that I'm with Curaleaf, and we're doing a lot to try to get out of that type of behavior. And some of the efforts that Khadija, our fearless leader on our CSR efforts, kind of the spearheading is around ERGs for women within our company, right? And so it gives us really like a space where we can connect with each other, support each other, uplift, right? And then beyond that, there's other work that she's doing around the Rooted in Good efforts, and trying to get minorities into 420 minorities, so really diversifying us across all platforms, including women, and partnering with different women businesses throughout the country. So it's definitely something that we are actively trying to work on. And honestly, we have on the marketing side specifically, we have great leaders in that are female. So I think the company is doing a good job in getting us into that space.
That's great, because what I'm hearing is that you all are being intentional about it, right? And I think that's where the change happens, of shifting from what we've traditionally have seen is being intentional. But I'll skip over to you, Lisa, to get any feedback from you about this, because again, having started out in 2013 in this space, I'm sure you've also seen the shift happen. So can you just jump in here and add to that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So, I mean, I think bro culture in marketing and bro culture in cannabis is a broader symptom of bro culture in America, where our boardrooms, our C-suite are still generally white, male, cis men. And so the culture and the value comes from leadership, and it comes from the top. So I think any change in culture must be prioritized at the highest levels of an organization to see that come through in the different channels, whether it's marketing or whether it's customer service or any other section of the business. And I think, with marketing, there's so many different ways to look at this. And I actually think we have seen an improvement over the last 7 or 8 years. I mean, some of the marketing in the very early stages of this industry was, frankly atrocious as far as how it was portraying women and certain communities, and the ways in which some of the beliefs around how cannabis can and should sell. But we have seen that change and mature a little bit, but I still think there's a lot of room to go, but it means getting diverse perspectives in the rooms that are making decisions, and for the folks who are envisioning and executing on these campaigns to ensure that the voices are being heard at that board level and that C-suite level, and so that it goes through all aspects of the organization. It has to start at the top, and that value has to be there in our companies.
And you know I have to jump in here, Gia.
I know. I was just going to say,
you know, I'm
might as well, because you've already touched on it, so it's important. And I said it before, like, just jump in. Let's make this more of a conversation than a Valda, Lisa. Like, if you're like, no, we already want to answer that, so I said jump in, Valda.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, I am literally glowing. Maybe it's the light that's in front of me, but
no, you gotta glow.
I am. No, I'm not having another baby. Let me just say that. But, so, those days are over. Okay. But no, I mean, you know, Trulieve, everyone should know, has a female CEO, right? I think when we talk about at the top, so number one, starting with Kim, but I have to share these statistics because we pulled them together and they're factual, but 38% of our leadership and 48% overall are women. Mm-hmm. Okay. So imagine that 38% of leadership are women and 48% of our employees overall are women. 25 at Trulieve. Yes, this is Trulieve statistics.
I'm taking notes. I don't know.
Yeah. So let's start. We have a female CEO. We've got 25% of our board of directors are women. Okay. So you've got number one, the CEO is a female. Number two, 25% board of directors are women. Third, 38% of our leadership and 48% of our employees overall. Right. So I throw that out there because for me, and you know, I really just wanted to work for a great company. It wasn't, but I met Kim and I thought she was awesome too. You know, but it was particularly icing on the cake to work for a strong company with strong female leadership. And so, you know, I say the more women enter the industry, the stronger we are overall as an industry, and the company will be, quite honestly. And so one of the things that we can tangibly do, I think there was a question of how do we keep the industry diverse, both culturally and more women? Yeah, I would say it's up to each one of us on this panel and anybody else that's in this industry to bring another one in. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's nothing that beats talent. And so regardless of what that talent looks like, you bring them in, you don't abandon them, right? I often talk you know, on some other panels about having sponsors or mentors or your own personal board of directors, as I call them, right? The people who advise you, maybe help you not open your mouth in instances that you feel, maybe send that text to the person that can pull you back from the edge kind of thing. No, but in all seriousness, I think it's about the more of us that are here, that stay here, right? And that bring some others along and certainly serve as a great example and can mentor, the better off the industry will be.
I actually want to go back to Yesenia, because I'll tell you what's interesting. Mm-hmm. Not only do I love the numbers that you just shared, Valda, because I think that that's so critical. I wrote those numbers down myself, and I'm going to use them in terms of when we're referring to businesses in this industry. But I also had the pleasure of meeting with the Curaleaf team. Mm-hmm. And just recently on a discussion, the few of the women at Curaleaf said, people didn't know that there was a male CEO because in the meetings, they kept meeting women, senior women at Curaleaf. And the fact that you just shared those numbers as well at Trulieve, to me, really shows the shift that is happening, right, in our industry. And what I'm hearing, and I'm hoping what people are taking away from this, not only just in terms of the roles in marketing, but when we think about what's being presented in these brands, right? When we look at those forward-facing images, you know, before, let's just say, before the summer happened where companies were putting these black tiles up, right, to show support for Black Lives Matter, or, you know, are highlighting their one woman on the board or one woman in leadership, what I'm beginning to see is an emergence of tapping that talent and identifying the talent of women overall who can fit and really lead these efforts behind some of these big companies. And I think both of you, Valda and Yesenia, are really showing us today that it's not just talk, that you guys really do exist. And I think that there's a misconception in the industry that there aren't a lot of women at some of these big companies.
I think it's quite the opposite, honestly. I mean, when I first joined Curaleaf 2 years ago, that I walked into, our executive offices in Miami, I was looking around and I was like, okay, like we have no males in the office, like none, except one showed. I was like, okay, and it's a little different right now, but we're still definitely the majority, at least out of Florida for sure. But again, depending on where we are, I do think that women definitely stand up in our organization.
And you know what I want to see more of? I want to see more at the grow, right? In cultivation. Okay. I think marketing traditionally, you do see many women, right? There's certain functions like HR, marketing, you see them. But, R&D, how about that, right? So you need a science background and certainly research and so forth. So that's what I mean, really, is looking at all parts of the organization and identifying talent, diverse talent that absolutely can. And a lot of times, and for me, I'm happy to have been welcomed into the industry, into this company. But, I know that you need a balance of people who are kind of OG, but at the same time, the new ones that bring ideas. But I think we need them at all levels and in all functions of the company. So I just want to make sure I mention that. A lot of times people get comfortable seeing women and minorities in certain functional areas, right, and not in others.
Right. Those expected roles, right? So I actually want to circle back to the marketing piece, because I think the other point that I'd actually like to touch on is really marketing in terms of demographic, right? And in an earlier meeting that I had today, some folks were really surprised to learn the amount of marketing that they're beginning to see targeted to the 50 and over, right? And the difference. So can we talk about how marketing is changing in our industry in terms of to the 25 plus versus the 50 plus? And I'm actually not going to even point to someone. I'm going to say someone jump in here.
I like to talk, so. That's what they told me. I was a little chatterbox when I was little. But anyway, no, we, I have to mention it's the 50th anniversary of 420, right? And so when you think of the 50th, there's, hippies, you think of that time. So it's not it's not impossible to see marketing to those who are 50 and above. So I think that's absolutely makes sense. And I think maybe some of them are happy to see that it's legal now, right? So it's a bit of nostalgia there, maybe tapping into that. We have one of our brand partners who actually, goes on the Silver Tour, where he, talks to seniors in nursing homes about the use of cannabis. So that's been a part of our program for several years now. And I think, importantly, too, having from a product mix standpoint, different form factors. I tell people that also are very surprised that, when they hear that I work in the industry, they're thinking, I don't know, that everybody in the office is smoking or whatever. But I'm like, guess what? Not even everyone who is part of the cannabis consumption community is necessarily smoking. Right. So there's so many different forms of the product that are out there. So when I think about marketing, it's absolutely about those target consumers. The 50 plus are very, very relevant. And, it's really about making sure that we also have products that meet their lifestyle and their needs, for sure.
Anyone else want to jump in here?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think when it comes to demographics, it's important to build in an inherent feedback loop with them and to make sure you're communicating with them about their needs, like Valda said, going out and actually speaking to them. Because I think it can be easy to generalize, and I get questions of how do you market to women or how do you market to millennials? And I'm like, well, I use cannabis to help me sleep, and so does my 60 plus mom, and we're in two different demographics, but we might use it for the same reason. So building in that feedback loop, so you are actually hearing from and understanding these communities and their unique needs, and not making assumptions based on either their age or their generation about why they use the products. And again, it's back to that point about how cannabis is so diverse as far as its form factors and the reasons that people use it. it, that I think making sure that feedback loop is there and that you're getting research data and constantly checking it and updating it to make sure your products are serving the needs of the community. Because if that match is there, it's going to make your job marketing so much easier.
Great point. Great point. Anything to add here, Yesenia?
I mean, look, just in general, I think this is the first industry that I've been a part of that it's not when you're going out to try to do something with media or anything within marketing that you can easily say, okay, this is my demographic, right? I want to reach, I don't know, Hispanic women, ages, like that does not exist here. And I think that's one of the most beautiful parts of working in this industry is that, whether it's the same medication that is used for different purposes for different people, but there is no one size fits all. It's really it really goes across all age groups, genders, ethnicities, and I think that is something to keep in mind, that this is not a cookie cutter. You may come in with a product and think, okay, this is going to appeal to my 25 to 35 demo the most. And when it goes to market, good luck with that,
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's definitely something to keep in mind as you're, going out into the market.
Well, I've often said that cannabis is the generational bridge that's bringing us all together. It's the first industry where I have seen a daughter, a mom, and a grandmother all come to our events. And I'm thinking, wow, that doesn't happen very often, right? When you think about music taste, it depends on who likes it. I mean, I know once my mom took my daughter to a hip hop concert and she actually came back and said, wow, they were smoking joints there. And I was like, yeah, Mom, they were. So to that, here's a plant that's really, bringing us all together, right? And it might be for different reasons, but we've got that one common core. So I want to change and shift the conversation a bit, because I don't think we often have this level of expertise all in one space that some of our small business owners get to ask questions, and you are going to have a moment to ask questions. But again, I remembered just keeping a tally of what people have asked over time. So advice for small business owners who are doing it themselves. When you've seen brands out there, what do you think some of these brands could be doing differently? I mean, there's a lot of new brands that are launching. And the reason why I say that is, outside of the Women Grow piece, I've been doing PR for over like just 30 years, right? Even though I'm like 29, but I cannot help but to see someone's brand and immediately my PR wheels are going, right? And I'm thinking, oh, they should have done this. Oh, they should do that. Do you come across brands where you're like, wow, I wish I could get in touch with this brand development and maker and tell them or give them this advice? Does that happen? And if so, what advice can you give some of our small business owners out there?
I can start with this. I think when you're small, your best tool is your story, and really knowing that and telling that. And when you're small is also a great opportunity to outline your core values and your mission and vision. So what is it that you stand for? What makes you different? And not just in those marketing terms of, what is your unique selling proposition, but what is the ethos of your company? When you're a small business owner, you're doing everything. And I know when I first started CMA, some of the first customers, our first members supported us because they knew me and liked me and knew my vision when we barely had a product. So you are the heart of your business so early on. And while that can be terrifying to some degree, it can also be a strength if you're really, speaking your own truth and being authentic in your story. And then as you grow and get bigger and have more employees and have more products, you know that ethos of the company, and that will really resonate and shine through as things get larger and slightly more out of your control as far as telling that, getting that message out there. So I think it's never too early to define that and practice that and just know your story and see how that comes across when you're a smaller business.
So in terms of telling the story, and we do have a question where someone's asking if you, Lisa, offer training, but I think before asking you to answer that, one of the questions that often come up is how do we even identify someone in being a good marketer? What kind of skills should these companies look for when they're tapping a marketing company? I'll go to you, Valda.
Yeah, what should company, oh, you mean if an entrepreneur is looking for?
Yes, a marketing firm, or an individual marketing expert. What type of skills should they be looking for? What questions should they be asking?
Yeah, so I would say, so I'm going to do the people, right? The soft skills side, because there's nothing beats actually having someone who cares, right? I mean, it's very basic, cares about you, will respect, right, your story, as Lisa said. I love what Lisa said. You know, you have to be authentic, because if you're not, then people see through it, right? And so someone, I would say from a skill standpoint, so aside from making sure that you're not just paying for expertise, but you need to you need to trust your instinct and whether they will have your best interest at heart and support you. But besides that, I would say you also need to ask them to see their work, right? Another way for me that I actually see whether people can demonstrate what they say they can do. So if they have, say that they're expert at creative and advertising, okay, great. I'd love to see some examples of what you've done before. If they say they're expert at creating websites, oh, can you give me some examples of the websites that you've created, right? And then you go on there and you kind of search around. So you do your own checking, right, of what they've said to you that they're good at. But I would say for sure, I always love great photographers and videographers because that's content, right, that you can then use either on social media or on YouTube in particular is the second largest search engine. So I hope everybody knows that. And that's a great platform for people to find you, discover you, but also go deeper, really, to understand what you're about or what your company is about, etc. And then aside from that, yeah, I wouldn't trust the whole social media expert either because the algorithms change all the time. So, it's particularly if it's a cannabis-based business, then you've got to do your own research there, is what I would say.
Do you guys think that when a small business is tapping or looking for a marketing expert, they should already have cannabis expertise?
Not necessarily.
No,
not necessarily.
I think more than the expertise, if you can find someone or an agency that can prove that they have worked in challenging industries, challenging spaces, and how they've overcome those challenges, I think that speaks more. Because at the end of the day, the cannabis experience helps if you have it, because it gives you a little bit of a background, but it's more of how you've navigated spaces, and that's what's going to help you be successful.
I would say they have to be willing to read and understand the regulations. I have heard horror stories from brands who have hired firms in vice industries who have never read the regulations and put out information that has gotten them in trouble with the authorities because they do not understand the unique landscape here. So if they're not willing to get their hands in that legalese and understand that, then I would move on.
Okay, good. So hopefully that is helping many of the folks that are tuning in. So I know that there are some other questions. Danny, I know you're in the chat. If there are any, just feel free to pop them in. Oh, wait, for sure. Regs and compliance.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right, Beth. Before we wrap up, because I would like to ask, are you guys watching or can you share if there are any trends that you're beginning to see that or you believe you will see in the next 3 to 5 years in this industry as we've already seen shifts happen? But do you believe that there are some trends that you'd like to quickly talk about before we wrap up today?
I mean, so as far as like product innovation and anything like that, I think definitely showing transparency behind, what you're putting out for the consumer. And the trends that we're starting to kind of pick up on is that people are looking for, a variety of ways for consumption, right? So it's no longer just about the flower and the highest THC, and people want to know about the terpenes and how, what benefits they may bring to their experience or not, and different methods of consumption. I think is definitely something that we're starting to see a bigger appetite for.
Yeah, I think tied into that might be still a growing base of people who are really looking for discrete use. Mm-hmm. And that may be what's behind, I think, those different forms. There's absolutely, I call them the loud and proud. If you had a perfume that smelled like they would spray themselves, with whatever their favorite, hey, don't take that idea, with whatever their favorite strain smells like. No, but besides that, though, I think that as the stigma starts to wear off a little bit, I do think that you're seeing some people kind of tiptoe in versus jumping in, versus diving in, tiptoeing in. The other thing I would say too, though, is I think that there's a bit more of an acceptance that, that it's, I don't want to, this is going to sound bad, but it's not medicine in the traditional sense. Maybe that's a better way for me to say it, right? So it is good for you, right? But that it's okay if you express that you enjoy it too, that it brings you happiness. I guess that's what I'm saying, is that I think originally when the regulations started, there was this purely medicinal, almost to the Lisa's loud and proud. I see you. Originally there was this like purely medicinal, and I think in a lot of ways the state of Florida is still there with the packaging regulations where it's basically all white. Yeah. But at the same time, I think the people, even in the state of Florida, right, recognize that, yes, this helps me with PTSD, anxiety, depression, whatever the condition is. But you know what, at the end of the day, after this last year of COVID, God, can I just be happy? Can I just enjoy life? And you know what, if this helps me, relieve the symptoms of my condition, but it also makes me happy, then so what? Then what's the issue? Right. So I think that you're seeing that evolution as well of the industry and the belief in the plant, and maybe even we're helping to shift the perception of what medicine is. So one of the things in the food industry, when I was in Mangoes, I worked with chefs and restaurant industry and all that. There was a lot of talk about plant-based diets, right? Everything was plant-based. You saw the burger that wasn't made from, right, beef?
Right, from beef, right, plant-based.
Exactly. And to me, I think provocatively, I would love to talk about, well, what is medicine, right? So, right, what is medicine really? At the end of the day, if it's about you being healthier, not only physically, emotionally, and mentally, right, then let's have that conversation.
It's interesting that you say that, because we've had scientists and doctors on previous shows, and they've said the same thing. Like, our medicines always start from a plant first. That's at the core of all of our medicines that we use today. So I think that is an interesting conversation to have, and to really address it and stop dancing around, exactly what it is that we do at the end of the day use. So I love that. And it looks like a lot of people want you to consider loud and proud. And so I expect that next year you'll come back to us and say, and
the perfume,
white package, because Florida only allows white packaging, loud and proud. That's actually one of the things that we didn't get to talk about. And I can't believe how fast time is going, but packaging. Right. And while, we can talk to the packaging industry about this, but, within marketing, I'm sure that's also a challenge for many businesses and I think Lisa, even you touched on this in terms of like those guidelines. And Yesenia, you said that, Florida's very, strict about what things should be. So how do you, I guess the question is marketing and packaging, big headache, not so much, or whew.
I mean,
it's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're not separate. They're intertwined whether we like it or not. And unfortunately, at this stage at the cannabis industry, you have to have a conversation with the bud tender as opposed to picking up a product, looking at it, and reading it before you make that purchasing decision. But once you get home and experience it and open that package, that is a part of the brand experience, which does fall under marketing. And what you're reading, what you're seeing, what you're engaging with, all of that says something. And this is a side note, but even packaging as far as sustainability. I know when I see brands that are doing the most, whether it's in cannabis or otherwise with packaging to appeal to me, but it's very, very wasteful, it turns me off more than it is appealing to me. So it's absolutely as a part of it, of the marketing mix.
Mm-hmm. Gina, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Oh, now you can. Sorry
Yes.
about that.
Mm-hmm.
I just saw that comment come up about sustainable packaging. That was immediately what I was thinking about as Lisa was speaking. But you're absolutely right, Lisa. Gosh, I want to ask like 10 more questions, and I'm looking at the time. And so I also want to be mindful of your time. So one of the things that I do want to circle back to you, Lisa, do you do training around this? And can you talk about that? Someone asked.
Yeah, we do to an extent. So we don't necessarily have formal classes at this point, but we are regularly hosting content and webinars. We do a webinar about every 2 weeks at this point. And then we do what we call our cornerstone events, or what would be conferences, but they've obviously been moved online for the pandemic, which we do have our Cannabis Marketing Summit coming up in June, where we talk about all these different aspects. And they're led by our members who are experts in these different fields. So we do have an online library that has all of our webinars recorded, hundreds of hours of information up there, so folks can teach themselves based on what they need.
Fantastic. So what I'd like to ask, this is my last question to you all. I'm sure that there are a lot of aspiring marketing cannabis marketers out there that want to get in. Yesenia, I'm going to start with you because you shared your interesting background. What tips would you give someone that's looking to enter the industry and perhaps look to work at one of these major companies?
I mean, I think the most important thing is to find a company that you feel you can truly be a part of and that you're proud to be a part of, right? So I think that's number one, because it is such a fast-paced industry, and we dedicate so much time and effort into what we do every day that you have to feel passionate about, your peers and everyone you're with and the company that you're standing up for. So I would say that foremost everything else.
And Valda, anything to add here?
Yeah, I would say, maybe think really long and hard about what you are passionate about. Because oftentimes when I interview people that are interested in working for Trulieve, I'm really looking for what is that thing that they're going to bring, to the company that's going to add to the team. Sometimes I think people want to come into an interview and, almost be like expert in all things marketing. And that's just not the case, right? I've been in it for 24 years and I'm still learning and growing as well. So, think about what it is that either you have a special talent for, that, or a special experience in, or what you're passionate about. Usually what you're passionate about ends up being what you, are the best at as well, because you put more effort and time into it. So let that shine through in an interview as well. Or I would also say, I did a lot of work that's not on my resume, volunteer-wise and nonprofit, that I met people that way. So that didn't necessarily bring me to cannabis, but you'd be amazed. I tell people that, again, there's some real misnomers or misunderstandings about who's in cannabis, right? Probably, you know, people that you pass in the grocery store.
And
You know,
that's such an important point, because you're absolutely right. You know, again, it really is a bridge.
mm-hmm.
Unbeknownst to many people, you're probably connected to someone else who is a cannabis consumer in one format or another, right? It's not just all smoking. I have a personal question. Did anything surprise you entering this industry?
For sure.
We only have 5 minutes.
Yeah, I know. You asked us that question, and I'm like, at the end.
I figure, why not? I got you here. You know, and the reason why I say that is, again, I shared that I came from a PR background, right? And so when I came into this industry, I was like, ooh, you know, I mean, I came from a corporate space. So, you know, my perspective on things were, well, I would recommend we do things this way or that way. And I would imagine, just if I were to add all of your experiences together, I mean, we're talking like 80 years of experience damn near on this platform. And I'm sure that you saw some things here that probably surprised you and thought, wouldn't expect that here, or thought it would be a little different. Would that be a yes or a no?
Absolutely. But
Yes.
go ahead, Lisa.
I would say, and to your earlier point about how to get started, and particularly speaking to the women listening, to not wait too long to plant your flag. I mean, I started CMA in my mid-20s and really had very little idea of what I was doing, but it was a steep learning curve, and you do learn fast. And if you sit on the sideline for too long, you're going to miss your opportunity. And I speak with so many women who I ask to sit on panels or work with, and they're, you know, oh, I'm not ready yet. I'm not qualified yet. I don't have enough experience. And don't tell yourself a lie unnecessarily and sideline yourself. Men don't necessarily do that. And we are still building this industry as we go, and it is still early. So yes, it's okay to be a beginner, and it's important to do your own research, but to have the confidence to go for it and plant your flag, because I love being surrounded by peers and women who have done that. It's pushed me further, and I didn't see that when I was working in tech.
See, there's a surprising factor. Anyone else? We got 3 minutes before we wrap up. Yesenia, jump in there.
I mean, there was so many different surprises. I think in general, I'm just going to leave it more on a light note. When I first joined the industry, before even taking the job, accepting it, I sat with my kids and my family, and I'm like, listen, how do you feel about this? Like, are you going to be okay? You know, saying what mom does, or, you know, your daughter, or whatever the case may be. And, you know, my kids were like, oh yeah, you know, it's fine, whatever that case. And both my parents were like, and they're both patients now. And, you know, and I think I would have never, ever thought that they would have become patients, and it's really helped them in very different ways. But to this day, like, my mom comes in from out of town, and she has her medicine with her. And it really, you know, I think that really did surprise me, that, you know, we're able to have these conversations openly now. And yeah, so I would say that for sure.
I'll stay on that vein, and I'll say, for me, it had the surprise for me, you know, is the broad range of people who are consuming cannabis. Literally from the golf course and tennis courts to a cast of characters in all kinds of and I've met so when you asked what surprised me, I was like, maybe I should wait and talk about this off camera. No, I have met a great variety of people, and I will just leave it at that, and I enjoy them all.
That is wonderful. Listen, I'm glad you answered that. And the reason why I asked that question is that there is oftentimes people have presumptions on this plant, on this industry. There are some areas that are conservative that surprise me, and I'm thinking, are you kidding me? We're talking about weed. Are you? But then there are areas that people are, you know, very open and engaging. I'll even share that one of the things that surprised me about this industry, at least for those that I engaged, how welcoming they were, to a degree of, I'm used to entering, meetings and offices where people are greeting with handshakes, and they're like, "Oh, let me hug you," and I'm thinking, "Wait, we don't do that in business." But here, it really is a connecting. Again, goes back to that point that this plan is really a connector, and how warm and welcoming people can be, and how excited they get to talk about this. It really is. What is that when you're trying to break the ice? It's an icebreaker. There you go. You mentioned cannabis, and you really see those eyes light up. So you know what? I really appreciate you all joining us today. And I really appreciate your time and your insight. And, I don't know who's watching us, but please know that this will replay. And if you wanted to connect with any of these amazing women, the handles of their companies are listed. And so be sure to connect with Valda and Yesenia and Lisa. And as you know to connect with Women Grow at Women Grow, and stay tuned for more incredible conversations like this. We plan to bring more. We hope Valda comes back with her proud, loud and proud. and you know what? I want to just wish you all an early happy 420, and have an amazing rest of your week.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much,
Great being with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.